Hello, everyone. Welcome to a series of lectures on statistics. We want to discuss statistics in these lectures. If you recall, in the past, we defined what statistics is. Statistics is the collection and analysis and displaying of numerical data. So, three things are happening: collecting the data, collection of data. It could be in the form of survey or whatever, and then analysis of the data and displaying the data, which means communicating, the results of your findings. And data, of course, means any piece of information. Now, when conducting a survey, it is important to choose the right questions to ask and to select the appropriate group to survey. So there's two things here about the groups that are supposed to be surveyed. One is population, one is sample, and we have to know the difference. A population, what is the definition of population? All individuals or items that belong to a group being studied, okay? Let's say you want to know how many people live in a given country, let's say in Canada. So all individuals that belong to a group being studied will be their population. So the whole entire population of Canada would be your population. Okay. And the other word we need to know is sample. That is a group of individuals or items that are representative of the population from which they are taken. So in many situations, it is not practical or possible to survey an entire population, right? So let's say you want to know what is the favorite drink of, let's say, Canadians. So it is not possible to survey, millions of people and survey every single person in the whole country of Canada. So a representative sample of the population is selected. So a sample is a group of individuals, or it could be items, that are representative of the population from which they are taken. So this diagram here shows which one is bigger. Population is the big group, basically, and sample is a small group of this population that is taken. And in order to select this sample, there are different sampling techniques that in your course documentation you can find about them. There are different techniques of sampling. There is a sample called simple random sample, for example. Stratified random sample is another one. Voluntary response sample, cluster sample, convenience sample, and systematic sample. These are just some of them, to name few. And in your course documentation, all these different sampling techniques are defined with enough examples. And there are a variety of sampling techniques, as I said, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Okay. Speaking of surveys, a survey contains a bias if it does not reflect the population. Very logical. Now, you may say, what is a bias? Well, a bias is an intentional, or sometimes unintentional actually, distortion of data collected in a survey. So when you're collecting data in a survey, sometimes there is unintentional distortion of data, or sometimes, in fact, it may be intentional. So that's what a bias is. And when we talk about collection of data, it could be like in two forms. When you're collecting data, we have two types of sources. One is called primary source, and one is called secondary source. When you conduct a survey, for example, or perform an experiment, you are the primary source. So primary source is you, because you individually, by yourself, are collecting the data. You're not using anybody else's data. So primary source is a person who collects the data for their own use. But the secondary source could be internet, could be a website like Stats Canada website, or it could be a book or a textbook from public library. It could be any kind of published material. It could be another magazine, that you're using, and that is called a secondary source. So in collection of data, there's two types of sources: primary source and secondary source. Secondary source is a database or research collected by someone else, by some other website, by some other author of a book that you found in public library, or it's like a source other than you yourself. So that's about primary source and secondary source, and about collection of data. And as we said, bias is that distortion of data that is collected. Now, we said that a survey contains a bias if it does not reflect the population, and that's not a good thing, actually. With some examples, you might understand what's going on here. There's three different types of biases. Either we have response bias, or measurement bias, or non-response bias, we call it. So response bias, it is caused by wording of the survey question. When you are preparing a survey, you want to ask about favorite sports of students in high school, or any other kind of question you have to be very careful about the wording of the survey questions, so that it doesn't include any kind of bias. Let me give you an example. Let's say we want to find out what is the favorite car of grade 12 students, for example. Okay, so you can give your survey question like the following: what is your favorite car? That's it. No strings attached. So that will be a good survey question, free of bias. However, if you intentionally or unintentionally are a big fan of German cars, for example, you will change the wording of your question, and you will ask a question like this. You're going to say, considering the fact that German cars are well-engineered cars, what is your favorite car? Or you may say, considering the fact that American cars are very economical and the prices are very appropriate for the buyers, what is your favorite car? So this kind of survey question is not good, because it has bias in it. And the type of bias is called response bias, because you are asking the person who is surveyed to answer the question in a way that you like. In other words, you're influencing the person who is being surveyed. So you're telling them, you're encouraging them actually to say, oh yes, they like German engineered cars. Maybe they don't like German cars, but you are encouraging them to say so. Or maybe they don't even think about the fact that American cars are like cheaper in price, but you're encouraging them to say, oh yes, for example, my favorite car is like such and such American car. But you know what? That's not what they really wanted. So basically, in your survey question, there's a bias involved there, because you're encouraging a certain response from the person, from the person who is being surveyed. So that bias is called response bias right there. There's another type of bias. It's called measurement bias, which is caused by unrepresentative of sample. Okay, unrepresentative of sample. It's called measurement bias. So in your course documentation, all of these are, of course, defined, and you can find and read about them. Let's say you're asking about the best soccer player. Okay, so you're in a survey question, you're saying, okay, who is your best soccer player, for example? Okay, that's the question. And then you give options. You say option A, Messi, for example. Option B, Ronaldo. Option C, Neymar, the Brazilian soccer player. Option D, Pepe. And then option E, you put other. Okay? So when you're giving all these choices on your survey question, you're asking who is your favorite soccer player. See, when you're mentioning these names, you are indirectly inviting the person who's being surveyed to select one of these items. But maybe in their opinion, the best soccer player is none of these people, Maybe in their opinion, somebody else, or Mr. Sarkisian, for example, is the best soccer player in their opinion. Who knows? But the name is not there. So everybody is going to choose probably other, or maybe not so many people will select other. They're going to select one of these players anyway. So this is called measurement bias, which is unrepresentative sample. So again, you should not have a situation like this where you mention names. By naming specific players, the survey influences the respondents' answers. That's what we're saying here. So you should just leave it blank. You should simply ask, for example, who is your favorite soccer player? Just like that. Another thing is that exaggeration of results may also happen here, because when people see these like 4 names, like many of them are going to choose like, for example, Ronaldo. So then there's going to be like exaggeration of results where it may not be a true reflection of the survey results. And the third type of bias is called non-response bias, which is caused by interpretation or representation of the results. Now, what is a non-response bias? You might have been in restaurants in the past, maybe for like lunch or dinner or something. And then in these restaurants, the wait staff ask, for example, every 5th customer or every 10th customer to answer a questionnaire about the food quality and the service that they received at the restaurant. They ask questions about the meal. And about 30%, let's say, 30% of customers surveyed filled out the questionnaire. So 70% didn't fill out the questionnaire, probably because they were happy with the meal and the service. The majority of customers who fill out the questionnaire complain about poor service. Okay. The restaurant manager concludes that the wait staff need more training. Now, is this reasonable in your opinion? Well, the thing is that out of those 30% of customers who filled out the form, probably they were not happy with part of the service, or maybe they didn't like the food or whatever, and that's why they're complaining. So as a result, the manager says, okay, I'm going to spend like $10,000. I'm going to send all my wait staff to go and have special training and this and that and that. They have to go take courses, so that the situation would improve. But in reality, maybe nothing is wrong with the restaurant, nothing is wrong with the service, nothing is wrong with the food. Because think about it, when we say 30%, that means from like every 100 customer, 30 customers only, fill out the form, answer the questions on the survey. So imagine 70 people, they were happy with the service. That's why they didn't even bother, filling out the survey or answering the questions on the questionnaire. But the other 30% who bothered, writing something, maybe like 10 of them made like good comments. They said, okay, the food was good, service was good. They were raving about one of the wait staff, who knows. And then the other 20 people, maybe they had issues with the food or service. So basically, out of 100 people, you see that only 20 people were not happy. 80 people were happy, which is like a big success for a restaurant, okay? So this doesn't mean that everybody is like complaining about the food, complaining about the service, and this doesn't mean that the manager of the store or the restaurant has to send the staff for training and taking courses and spending $10,000, whatever. Okay, so this is an example of a non-response bias. Okay, many people, 70 people out of 100 people, didn't even respond. Okay, why? Because they were happy with the service. So interpretation, this is caused by interpretation or representation of the results. So wrapping up briefly, we said that a bias is an intentional or unintentional distortion of data, and we said that the survey question contains a bias if it does not reflect the population. And we said that survey questions must be free of bias for sure. And there's 3 types of biases: response bias, measurement bias, and non-response bias. All of these are in your course documentation. You have to read them. And we said that sample is always smaller than population. And the definitions are clear. And the first half of this unit discusses all these definitions: what is a primary source, what is a secondary source, and so on and so forth. And then later on, more calculations, statistical calculations will kick in. Okay, thank you. And keep practicing and keep reading the course documentation.